Welcome everyone to the EED webinar number 8 on May 8th, 2019. And our theme is Resilience in Action, Increasing Passion and Willpower. And joining us is Alina and Irene, and a few more may join us as we go along. So I'd like to start off with Alina and Irene, just what is initially attracting you to this theme of the webinar? What brings you here today? This can just be what you're curious about, what you'd like to know, or anything. I just would love to know what your investment here is.
In bringing back resilience.
Okay.
And not necessarily in myself, but creating resilience in others and, and reenacting that resilience in others, with others.
When you say reenacting, what do you mean by that?
I work with currently with a team of young entrepreneurs, and they are, of course, not uneven throughout the process, and I would like to learn better how to actually to bring resilience, them at the resilience point.
Okay. All right. Now there's, and I'll get to you, Irene, in a second here, because I know you were going to add something. Normally, in the past webinars, we've talked about the being of resilience, like to get into a resilient state, right? Now this is about using the resilience, expressing it, putting it, so action is very, very, very important. It's not enough to just be resilient. You must be active and test it, use it. By actually testing our resilience, by risking losing our resilience, we gain more resilience when we stay in that mode of consciousness of resilience. So we set it up in the being, then we must get it into the action. So, yeah, so you're going to learn, Alina has attended other webinars and also Module 1, so you're going to get a different take on how we embed resilience into any dialogue, facilitation, coaching, or mediation. So, because this is now action-oriented. And what is going to guarantee that the action is actually going to happen? Because many conversations promise action and then it doesn't get done. And there's many reasons for why the action will fall apart, which we'll get into in a moment. Irene, what brings you here?
Yeah, for me, EED is very new to me. I heard of it, I think 2 years ago, but I didn't really go into that. After I got the CPCC certification, I realized I do need to get into more practice, more learnings in CPCC, as well as some other methodologies.
Yes.
So I'm thinking to potentially in the future to participate the EED, the training, the programs.
Great.
However, I also realize I need to prepare more before I really go into the courses. Because, for example, and maybe it's also a language issue, barrier to me.
Okay.
Resilience, I know the word.
Yeah.
How to interpret it in the coaching concept, in the EED concept.
Okay.
I'm not completely clear, and lots of similar situation. I realize if I get more input before I go to the course, then it could be more effective, the course itself. So that's why I think, okay, I'll try my best to participate as many as webinars or other learnings myself.
Excellent. Yeah, it's a very good point. I want to keep defining and redefining resilience, because a lot of people have different assumptions. People define it differently depending on who's defining it.
Yeah.
Okay. For example, psychology is defining resilience in one way. Science is and physics is defining resilience in another way. So I will define it here on this webinar, how is EED defining resilience and how are we treating it? And you're going to get that throughout the whole webinar, but I will also make sure that I define it as we go along and before we get too deep into it. Okay.
Okay, great.
Excellent. All right. I was going to say something else, but now I've lost it. Oh yeah, I was going to say, yeah, keep coming back to the webinars. I love just giving the information. The one thing about these webinars is you'll get the theory, the concepts, the philosophy. We give you some hints at the techniques, but in an hour, I can't necessarily teach you all the details of the techniques. That's what the workshops are for. These webinars are designed to inform you, spark your imagination, inspire you, go try things out, try out the concepts and philosophies. And then when you come into the workshops, you'll have more of a foundation and a background as well to be able to learn and practice the techniques as we teach them. And for our workshops, there's really nothing to prepare. You can come in cold, knowing nothing, and you'll be just as fine. The advantage of the EED system is that in one sense, it's very simple. In another, it's very rich. So it contains a lot of complex variations, but it's packaged in a simple way. We try to keep it as simple as possible, knowing that you can only go so simple, okay? So but it equips you well to be adaptive and flexible and to deal with variation, because human beings they have a whole range of being and behaving that we can't stick every human being in just one box. So this addresses it, whether you're leading or coaching or facilitating. Okay, so what are we discovering today? And I will define resilience as we do this. So we're getting an overview of the key elements for designing sustainable action, all right? And those actions are sourced from the person's own resilience, all right? I'm going to talk a little bit on some of the traps we can run into when we design actions too soon, or if we're trying to create action that is not connected to resilience, what can happen. So why don't I define resilience right now? Resilience, as far as EED is concerned, so classically resilience is the ability to bounce back. If you have a resilient substance, you can crumple it up, it's going to go back to its original shape and form, all right? It's like if you've seen some of this holographic or crinkly, or not crinkly, holographic wrapping paper for Christmas, or it's kind of plasticky. You can't crease it, you can't fold it, you can crumple it up, but it always goes back to a nice sheet of wrapping paper. So that's, in a way, a resilient substance. It always can go back to its original state, all right? It bounces back. Applied to human beings, it's like we keep bouncing back from our source, from our more permanent, timeless self. It's not about an ego or an identity. It's what's behind that ego or identity, all right? So in a way, it's like infinite awareness. It's the part of you that can observe yourself that's always there. It's something that can never be taken away. Now, when we get in touch with that source being, it allows us to be more flexible and adaptable, more accepting. And what resilience does is it is engaging our vitality and will to live. That's why we can bounce back. That's why we can rise from the ashes. That's why we can return from crisis, all right? It is that core vitality and will to live that enables us to be creative, to bounce back, to be adaptable, flexible, more accepting. We can also be more vulnerable, which enables us to be open and accepting. What I mean by that is we're open to discovery, without the fear of being destroyed. Our ego won't necessarily be open until it determines it is safe to open. Whereas when we are resilient, we can say, well, I can risk it and I can open them because I know that if anything gets destroyed, I can recreate myself. Okay. So, Irene, you had done the coactive training, got your CPCC, and one of their cornerstones is the client is naturally creative, resourceful, and whole. EED is going a level deeper. What makes them creative, resourceful, and whole? It's source. And from source comes the resilience, and from the resilience comes the resources and the creativity. And that resilience is innate. It's natural in all of us. We all contain it. It's not something that we gather or that we earn, okay? It's already in us. We are all naturally innately resilient. So it's one level deeper. And what we're doing in EED is resilience is not a concept, it is a direct experience. And so all of the techniques are designed so that the client and yourself, you are experiencing your resilience directly. And many times, we've all experienced resilience, but the question is when and how often. Many times we wait until things get really bad, until our resilience kicks in. That means crisis, when things start really falling apart and we get over our initial panic and fear, and then our resilience kicks in, all right? So what we're saying here in EED is you can have daily, hourly access to your resilience, a constant access to your resilience. You do not have to wait for crisis or emergency to use it, okay? So yeah, we're going to look at what are some typical traps when designing actions. And I'm including accountability here because most programs will combine action and accountability together. And if we put somebody into action too soon and make them accountable, there are some disadvantages and traps and some negative effects that can happen. What you're going to get by the end of this hour is some simple tools for building a better investment in somebody's action so that they are approaching the action with a natural passion and drive and a willpower, meaning it's coming from resilience, and so naturally there's passion and willpower that go along with it. It's not a forced action or an action based on fear or stress or obligation. How's it sounding? Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, I know what I was going to say to Irene too. You were speaking about language. So if there's anything that you don't understand, whether it's a word or a concept, just ask, okay, for clarification.
Yeah, so far it's good.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes I realize there are different layers of understanding.
Exactly. And
sometimes you feel like you understand it, but after a while you find, oh, see more.
Over the many years I've been teaching EED, and I used to be on faculty with Coactive, with CTI. I still found, even with native English speakers, we need to sometimes sit down and really pull apart a word and redefine it so everyone is on board with understanding what we mean by a certain word, because we have many different assumptions about what a word means a lot of times. And also what you're going to get is some simple tips for neutralizing fear and resistance when designing actions. Many times when somebody's moving into action, the fear kicks in, they lose all that good juice, energy, and resonance, and then you're like, what do I do? So we're going to give you some tips on how to overcome that. Okay. Very briefly, so what is EED? I know, Alina, you're familiar. Irene isn't, and anyone listening to the recording may not. So emergent essence dynamics, first of all, is a holistic approach. All right. And that doesn't necessarily mean holistic with just a person, but it's holistic in everything. Everything affects everything. We live in a universe that is holistic. This is the way we see it. So even our environment is participating in everything that's happening with us, okay? Our relationships to self, other, our world, and even time. All of it is holistically interconnected, okay? Because of that, it's also a fractal-based model, meaning EED works with repeating patterns. Everything works in cycles and patterns. We have our seasons, our lunar cycles, we have our daily cycles. We as human beings function in patterns, and so does nature. And so when we can start thinking of transformation and change as a pattern, it becomes easier to work with, and we can work on a much wider level, meaning we're using very similar or the same patterns in many different contexts, all right? So a simple way is the way I'm behaving at home, I'm behaving in similar ways somewhere else. The way I'm behaving in a coaching session as a client, I'm also using those same behaviors somewhere else. So that's a very simple way to think of fractal patterns. And so what we do is we're looking for how these patterns show up, then we can shift the pattern. That shifts the mindset and the outcome, okay? So we're always looking for what's the fundamental dynamic driving the moment. Also, we're working on a level of human dynamics, what drives our transformation, what drives our creativity, what drives our fear. These are all dynamics and patterns, okay? We're not focused on transformation. Transformation will naturally occur once we've focused on resilience. Resilience actually takes care of the transformation. And in fact, when we're restoring connection to resilience, most of the fear is going to fall away. Therefore, most of the need to transform things also falls away. And then what remains are the core patterns, the core creativity, the core fears that can be addressed. And then what happens is when we're restoring resilience, we're also restoring a person's well-being. Now they have more autonomy over themselves, which means they're not being driven out of fear or obligation or somebody else's rules. They are the creator of themselves and of their life. Now they are more liberated to make choices, not according to conditions, but according to their own source. When they're in this state, they have a more expanded state of consciousness, more access to creativity. So it's another way of how do you get somebody to be more creative, resourceful, and whole? You restore their resilience, well-being, have them in a sense of autonomy, and that makes the creativity flow, and they have more access to resources. So what we're really doing is this can end up being an apparent battle between our ego and our source essence, meaning the ego might be driven by fear. The source is not driven at all by fear because it contains everything. But how do you reconcile the two? We're not trying to eliminate the ego. We want the ego connected with source so that it's working in cooperation. So you don't have this inner battle between either or. It's not a good thing to live only from essence. It's not a good thing to only live from ego. The two bridge together, okay? When we do that, there's more liberation. The person is more resilient, therefore nothing is taboo in concept, but that takes a lifetime of work to really, truly make nothing taboo. So what we're really doing, it's not transformation, it's transmutation. We're taking everything that's already there and transmuting it or reordering it into the best version of itself, okay, into the most reconciled version of itself. So it's more an alchemical process rather than a transformation or fixing process, okay? So this can apply to coaching, of course. That's how we originally started EED, but it extends into leadership and mediation and facilitation and healing. It works with healing because we're restoring well-being and autonomy and resilience. It works with leadership because This is a very active approach. It's not passive. It's very hands-on. You're able to provoke things. You're able to get involved. It works with mediation because we work with dynamics. Now, what we're saying is EED is actually a combination of coaching, leadership, and mediation together. All right, so, and that will enhance all three of those professions. All right. And then it extends to facilitation, healing, sales, anything else, even cooking. We're in relationship with everything. Any questions on that? Or does it seem okay, clear, understandable? Okay, so let's look at why resilience and why investment. What I mean by why invest in actions, all right? And why are we building actions from resilience, okay? So this has to do with accountability. And so, why do we need to create accountability? What is your understanding of accountability from a coaching or leadership context?
You do what you say, or you do what you promise. You have to be accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I say or what I do, what I say, what I do, it's congruent. What's the effect of that? If I'm congruent, I do what I say, I fulfill the promise. What is the impact on relationship? What's the impact on myself in doing that?
There is a level of trust built in relationship. I mean,
it builds trust, absolutely, yeah. I'll build trust in myself, I'll build trust with you.
Absolutely.
Now, let's go a level deeper. How do I know what I'm promising? How do I know if I can deliver? Why am I making the promise? First reactions, you don't have to necessarily answer those questions, but what are your first reactions to those questions?
Well, okay, go on.
Sorry. Yeah, it comes to my mind immediately. It's like, why? Because it's important. It's not just important, it's just key important, super important.
Okay.
Should be done.
All right, so then who is it important to? I'm your coach, for example. And I say, so Irene, what will you do? You say, well, I'll do X, Y, and Z. And then I say, okay, by when? This is classic accountability. By when? And then how will I know? Now, there can be a trap in that. Now you've made a promise to me. I've not checked in if that's what you really want to do. You may be just saying it to shut me up. You might be saying it to please me. You might be saying it to please yourself. But now I've embedded this accountability and I say, Irene, wait a minute, you said by, May 15th, you're going to do such and such. I didn't get word back from you. Did you do it? Now, how are you feeling when you read that message? Oh God, yeah, I didn't do it. I better do it. Oh my God. You come back to the next session. You say, no, I didn't do the action. And I say, well, that's okay. We can learn from it. And I do that repeatedly and repeatedly with you. So there's a risk that there can be a pattern of breaking the promises, breaking the accountability. And it's a two-way street because I'm not sure why you're making those promises and I'm not really checking in. And then I might say, well, then let's learn. What are your values? But I mean, really, there's the simple answer is you're not coming from autonomy when you choose your actions and then make your accountability with me. In fact, I will go so far as to say, I don't need to hold you accountable for anything. You are the one that will hold yourself accountable. You're the one to be very harsh, you're the one that's going to be buried and dead in a coffin with that guilt on your mind that you did not do the action. I'm going to go off and live my life. But you're the one that has to live with your accountability. That sounds very harsh, I know. But if I take it to that level, what can I do differently so that you are going to guarantee to yourself that you will fulfill the promise, and that that promise actually is not a problem to fulfill? Do you understand? This is why we're saying spend time investing in actions and source these actions from resilience, because then you do not need to create artificial accountability. Now, what are your reactions to what I've just put forward or what I've just said?
When you asked me why I'm here, I didn't know exactly what to say, but now I understand it's something around this investment, which I feel that I need to master better.
Okay. I'd say many of us need to master this better. We tend to rush into action because we want to get things solved, right? But that can create more problems for us. So if we rush too soon into action, and what I mean by that is we're not connected to our source. We're more maybe inspired and excited by some idea, but it's still not plugged into our source. We might have that great energy and we might feel good for a bit, but then we risk that it might deflate. And then we begin, maybe we're creating action from fear or obligation or emptiness. This emptiness is the source of fear. So it's non-resilience, okay? So we might be rushing into action from a state of non-resilience. That is just going to create problems later, okay? And those problems can compound, because then I'd say, well, I shouldn't have made that choice. I'll change my mind. But then, and I do it again, creating a new plan, new action from non-resilience. And then I do that over and over. It becomes more of a pattern. I'm going to lose confidence in myself. And then I'm just going to even not want to make plans anymore. I'm not going to want to make any actions. So if we're acting from emptiness, this will eventually create stress, anxiety, pressure, obligation, reactivity, fear, or just non-action, as I said. This will cause procrastination, depression, or burnout, okay? If I'm really pushing myself and stressing myself out to act, to get things done, but it's still not from source, not from resilience, I'm going to run out of energy and I'm going to want to rebel. And that's what the burnout is. It's a hard no, I can't do any of this anymore. It makes me sick. You guys understand where I'm coming from? Okay. Now, add into that artificial accountability. So I've got an action created from emptiness or non-resilience, and now I add on to that accountability. Now I've made promises to someone else, and now they're checking in with me. Well, that can aggravate more non-resilience because it creates stronger obligation, or it might create dependency. And either way, and if that accountability is not followed through, it can weaken the will just as much as action from non-resilience will eventually weaken the will. So it's a compounding problem. So the two things we're covering here is, how do I make sure the action is coming from resilience? And instead of using accountability, how do I have the client choose their actions from autonomy, meaning they govern themselves? It has nothing to do with me or anyone else. They're making their choice from their own liberated state. So when we do that, when actions are sourced from resilience, they have more power and sustainability and autonomy. And another way to explain that is self-accountability. Because when actions are resilient, and I'll show you how to do this, the actions reinforce the resilience reinforces the action. So therefore it becomes self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating. It does not demand extra energy to do those actions. It's more of a natural flow. So then the action is not a problem to do. It's already happening, all right? When we build resilient investment in the action, that's going to reduce the need to create artificial accountability. That means we're reinforcing what makes it self-fulfilling, self-perpetuating. We're reinforcing that autonomy. So there's no need to build in accountability. We still can. I'm not saying we're eliminating accountability, but if we depend on accountability to get things done, we're already creating stress, anxiety, obligation, okay? So it's the investment is reinforcing the drive, the passion, the willpower, the autonomy, and the resilience. So everything, EED works on these closed feedback loops. Things reinforce each other so that it's all based on perpetual motion, okay? And I'll show you how that works in the way we build actions. Are there any questions here or even any disagreements to what I've put forward here?
Fully agree.
Okay.
I'm reflecting myself. No, I'm
Right.
just reflecting myself when reading this point by after, and very curious to go to the next, the action.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. So then we will do that.
Mm.
Okay. Now there are 4 keys to creating resilient action. And, 1, the action is fueled or driven by pleasurable energy and emotional drive. It's emotions which drive us to act. If the emotion is pleasurable, we're going to act more healthy, okay? We can also create actions that are fueled by negative energy and emotional drive. That's a lot of times what we're creating. It's emotional, but it's more stress, anxiety, doom. If I don't do this, my life will be destroyed. What it does is it debilitates our strength. It makes us weaker and weaker. When it's pleasurable energy that reinforces our well-being, it increases the emotional drive, and then it increases the energy, which increases our well-being. So it actually amplifies, and it makes us stronger and stronger, and it's more likely the action will get done. We need a concrete focus, a compelling vision. What I mean by compelling vision is there's a definite outcome to this action, and I'm drawn to it. I'm magnetized towards it. And it is very specific. It's not vague or ambiguous. If I don't have a specific target, I don't know where I'm going, okay? The specific focus makes it compelling. When you add the pleasurable energy and drive, it makes the vision even more compelling. So these are all interlinked, okay? There also needs to be meaning and purpose to the action. It's not just, I need to make phone calls, I need to call 10 clients so that I can build my business, otherwise my business will fail and I'll lose an income and I'll lose my kids and my house, right? That's not what we mean by purpose. There's a function like, yes, I need to make these 10 calls, but there's a higher contribution. I mean, what my business is really about is enhancing people's lives and their own sense of fulfillment. So each of those calls is an opportunity to open the fulfillment of someone else, which opens my fulfillment. There's a purpose that even if I get a no from the client calls, it still was a very fulfilling conversation, and that's what feeds me, for example, okay? So there's a meaning and a purpose to what we're doing with the action, okay? And all of that together reinforces the well-being, which also enhances creativity. When it's enhancing our creativity, that means we are prepared to deal with challenges, obstacles, curveballs, and unexpected variations of what could happen, all right? If we're not embedding our creativity into the action, then it's too rigid. And it's more likely to fail because we're not programming adaptability in here. Is this making sense? There's a previous webinar where we expanded on this much more. These are the 4 ingredients for creating an intentional focus, meaning if I want to manifest something, these 4 keys are embedded into a vision that you want to realize. But it's also the same things can be embedded into an action. Any questions on this so far? So when designing an action, already this gives you several questions to ask the person other than what will you do? Okay, so, well, what will you do? I'll make those 10 phone calls. What's the pleasure you get out of that? What kind of energy does that give you? How does that feed your well-being? All right. What's it all for? What's the higher purpose? What's the contribution you're making? What's the end vision or end outcome you see with those phone calls? What are you really focused on here? How does that drive you? How do you feel when you connect with that vision and purpose, right? How is that pleasurable for you? So you can use these 4 points and create so many questions. And a lot of times we don't ask those questions. We just say, so what are you going to do? Great. When are you getting it done? Do you understand? That's very, very empty. And it leaves it leaves ourselves open to risk of failure. These questions, when we embed it into the action, are creating more chance of success. Or at least action happening, even if the action doesn't happen exactly as we planned. But at least the action is happening. Okay, so how do we build action? Oh, that was supposed to be hidden. Whatever. Okay. So here's typically how I'm seeing people build action with people. Let's say if you're coaching, the client suddenly gets inspired, or they have this burst of energy. There's lots of resonance, and they'll say, oh my God, you're so resonant right now. What's possible? What will you do? And then how will you do it? And when, and how will I know? We're done. Okay. So the usual thing people are doing is when the client gets into a high inspired, excited energy, let's get an action in place, and that's it. I'm saying there are a few more things to do before you ask the question, what will you do? What's the action? So what we want to do is build any creative impulse into active energy. This is where they're externally radiating or generating energy. They're inspired. And they'll say, hey, everything's possible. Oh, I could do this, I could do that. They'll want to naturally get into brainstorming because they're very active. You might think, okay, great, this is the time for action. I'm saying no. Before you do that, take all of that active energy and now internalize it and connect it to a point of origin in the client, meaning their source. Because what can happen is maybe it was a value that inspired them. Maybe it was you that inspired them. Maybe it was a song or something else. They've used an external trigger to inspire all that active energy. If the trigger goes away, so does the energy, because the client did not have ownership of that excitement and inspiration. They're not realizing, oh, maybe the value triggered me, but now I'm the one sustaining this inspiration and excitement. So how am I creating and recreating and sustaining this energy? They need to get to know it. And where is it coming from within themselves? Then they don't need external triggers. So we want to internalize that active energy into source being. What will happen then is they're getting into a state of course, I want to move, I want to act. But before you act, what does that energy contain? Okay? And I'll talk a little bit later what you can do to contain the energy. Once they know I'm the owner of this energy and I'm the creator, now we reactivate it and get it circulating through the whole system. Now we want to get it charged up again. Now they're more conscious and aware of, I'm the creator, and here's the natural strength that I'm using with this energy. From natural strength will come natural contribution. It's almost like you fill up the cup, and when it starts to overflow, they just want to give that energy away. It's naturally generous. This generous energy, generous radiation of energy and creativity is what gets them to act and flow. So it's a giving Okay, they're giving their creativity and energy, and that's what's driving the action. Then we can reinforce that action. So they give, but now what are they getting back? How does this feed back to them? What's the benefit of the action? Sure, there's a future outcome, but how does that benefit them? This creates a closed loop of give and receive, which keeps them in flow, prevents burnout. Okay? A lot of people get into action. They might even get to this place where I feel so resilient and I just give. But if we didn't program in what they're receiving, they're going to get exhausted. Okay, and then again, they burn out, they rebel, or they go into inaction or depression. With the investment, what happens is then we're naturally building desire and willpower, and that's the accountability. Desire means it's compelling. This draws me out, okay? That's more external. The willpower is something internal. Okay, there is something permanently creative and timeless in myself, and despite all, I keep creating. So the willpower is directly related to that resilience, and the desire is directly related to that natural contribution. Okay, how is this sounding to you guys here? What do you take from this so far?
So for these 4 phases, but here I see this more as highlights and theory.
Yeah.
So only in the workshop you will do demos, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I added a half an hour to this webinar, I might be able to do a quick demo. There's more I could show you, and I can even do a short demonstration here. Let me see if I can fit something in. Really, it's more simple. It's about the kinds of questions you ask, because with each of these phases, this is more of a shift in your own focus and orientation. Here, I'm focused on getting the client to be activated with lots of excitement and energy, and they're externalizing it, they're expressing it. Now I want to take that active energy and start to internalize it so they can pinpoint a source and a quality here. Then I want to get that reactivated so it's charged up inside them and they're naturally radiating it and giving it. And then I want them to receive the benefits back. Okay, that's a way to put it more simply. Most people, as soon as they get active energy, they're moving into action and accountability. Okay, so we're putting in 3 extra phases or orientations. So here's what I mean by charging up the energy within. Let's say this is you, and it's a vertical energy. So we want to get in, we've got this active energy. Oh, I'm so inspired by my value of chocolate. Chocolate makes me want to savor everything in life. I want to explore and experiment and eat the whole buffet. Okay, great. So take all of that energy, even if they're doing this movement, like, oh, I just want to eat. Okay, fine. Follow that energy within. Where does it all go? Or where does it, all that expression, follow it backwards. Where does it begin in you? They'll find a center, a point of origin. This is the center. So you want it a location in the body. Maybe they'll say, well, it's coming from my heart, or maybe it's in my stomach. It could even be in their head, doesn't matter. What you want is you're getting them into the state of being before action. Oh, I could try everything in the buffet. I'm so creative and hungry. Okay, what's it like to have that creative energy? What's it like to be the creator? We're not creating yet. What's it like to contain all that energy? That's a key question. What happens is they get more into a stillness, all right? And it's like they're just vibrating with that energy. They're not using it, they're vibrating with it. There will be a sensation. Maybe it's warmth, maybe it's electricity, maybe it's fuzziness, who knows? Maybe it's liquid. And there's an unconditional quality that goes with this. There are 4 usual qualities. One might be limitlessness. typically when someone's very excited, they'll say everything is possible. So it's an unconditional quality of limitless creativity. My creativity never runs dry. What's it like to know that you have unlimited creativity here? Don't use it yet, just be it. I am creativity. Another one might be unity. Oh, I feel connected to everything. Everything, you know, like a unity and interconnection. Another quality might be love. Oh, there's just this great love or generosity or benevolence I feel towards everything. I am love. Or another one simply might be peace. I feel very still, very calm. And with any of these qualities, when they're in these unconditional states of being, this is a state of essence. Nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to be. They just are this quality. So this is the state before action. Then we can start activating and circulating that energy. We start from that body center and pay attention to the sensation and the quality. And now we can run it down to their feet, up to their head, and just allow their whole body to get activated with that energy. It doesn't actually take long, okay? The effect is they feel completely charged up, resilient, ready to go. And what will happen then is they'll want to start giving that energy out, okay? So from that love, unity, limitlessness, or peace, there will be, it'll start to express itself as a natural strength. Like, I feel like a warrior with a big heart, great love, and I'm giving love out, okay? So what's it like to feel that strength? What's it like to give it, okay? And when they're giving it, that means they're making a contribution. It's a natural contribution from strength, all right? So when they see that contribution being made out there, what's the effect? What's the vision they see, okay? How are they giving it? That might turn into strategy. And then it might turn into specific actions. Like, who are you giving it to? How are you giving it, okay? So what is developing is a future outcome, okay? Now, the next phase here then is, so what are they getting back? I'm the warrior that's giving love to, I don't know, teenagers, to have them have more faith and confidence in themselves so that they can believe in themselves more. I don't know, okay? Which means I might be giving some workshops, which means I need to develop my marketing materials. And I'm gonna do that tomorrow. I'm gonna create a flyer. Do you understand? So what I'm doing is we're going to do a back and a forth of this give and receive until it works its way down from contribution to vision to strategy to action. Okay. So I don't know, I'm using this example. I'm just making up this example on the top of my head. Like, so I'm a warrior with an open heart. I give love. I want to work with teenagers so they open their heart. And what's inspiring about that? Well, that they put their phones down and they actually start talking to each other and relating to each other heart to heart. Well, what's the benefit for them? But what we want is, what's the benefit back to you? What are you receiving from that? Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I feel good. I feel good seeing them open their hearts. No, that is not good enough. That's like fake martyrdom, or I'm so noble, I'm a hero, I saved the children. No, 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 no. What is it doing to you? Well, how does it benefit your own well-being? I feel more strong in myself. I'm actually feeling like I'm loving myself more. Well, what's the benefit of that? Well, that's going to strengthen my relationships with my own children, with my own spouse, right? So it's not about I'm giving away out of the goodness of my heart something to benefit others. No, I do have a benefit back. This is tricky because a lot of people will not admit they're going to get personal benefit. They just want to be these noble, charitable people, but they end up turning themselves into a martyr, and secretly they're expecting something back, but they're not admitting it, okay? Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? Mm-hmm. It must be, yes, there's benefit to the world, but there is personal benefit and personal well-being back. What that's going to do, it's what is it reinforcing in yourself?
I have a question.
Yeah.
how would you recognize the truth that the client is speaking the truth?
Even if they say, I want to give away everything I own and everything I possess inside, you still ask them, how does that feed your own well-being? What does that reinforce within yourself? And they might say, I feel freedom in the emptiness.
Mm-hmm.
Great. What's getting reinforced in you then? Okay. What you want to watch out for is this, oh no, I couldn't possibly take or receive anything. It's not about me. That's false selflessness. Sorry?
What if they react like that? How?
Well, say, fine. Oh no, it's not about me. It's not about me. Okay, so great. So give it all. Aggravate it to the end. All right, so give everything. And what's it like to watch everything benefit from everything you've given? What's your reaction to that? Okay. Mm-hmm. When they say, well, they're so happy and they're beaming, they're radiant, you say, and how do you react? Oh, well, it makes me feel warm inside. Okay, well, there's your benefit. You feel warmth. What now is, how does that feed your own well-being? How does that reinforce? I mean, we speak about this in much more detail in the workshops, but I'm pausing on this just because sometimes clients do not know how to receive. They give, but they think it's wrong to receive something back. Okay? Not all clients, but some. When they get the give and the receive together, it will create a sense of purpose and meaning because it includes them in the purpose. Okay, some people will say, well, my purpose is just to save all the teenagers of the world. And like, okay. But what's what are you receiving from that? Okay.
Is it possible? I think once people realize in more depth what that gives them back, they may also or some of them may try to readjust their vision.
Well, this is what will happen is with ED, you don't just do this once. You go back and forth because this is a perpetual loop.
Right.
So whatever we first charge them up. What are they giving? What's the outcome? What does that send back to them? What do they receive? How does that reinforce what's getting charged up? Now, what are they giving? Now, what's happening out here? Now, what are they receiving? Now, what's getting charged up? And we do this again and again and again. And it will start from initial contribution to a more clarified vision. It'll start to crystallize into a strategy and then pinpoint into some specific actions. Okay? But it's all based on charge it up from that source into resilient energy, which then naturally is given, which creates an outcome, and then which sends something back that benefits them, okay? And so the more we go back and forth with this, it starts to narrow itself down into something concrete. And just by going through that process, you're building natural desire and willpower, which is creating the accountability. How are you guys doing with that? Yeah. Okay. So when we charge them up, see what they naturally give, what's the outcome, now what do they receive, and how does that reinforce them? Okay. That can start boiling down into an action. Now, they might say, well, I'm going to save all the children of the world. Well, okay, big action. But let's make it a little simpler, more immediate. Let's make it specific and concrete. What can you do today? What can you do in 1 hour? All right. Also, I'm not a big fan of doing big dramatic actions. I'd rather have somebody do something very simple that doesn't have a big dramatic consequence, but it has a ton of meaning for them. Okay. So if they say, well, I have to choose between my children or my husband, I'm like, well, that has a big consequence, right? What if you had to choose between two different chocolate bars? It's the same thing. You're going through the same process of choice, but if you choose the wrong chocolate bar, your life doesn't end. But if you make the wrong choice between your husband and your children, there is a bigger consequence. Do you guys understand what I mean? This is, again, why we work with fractals, is they can learn from very simple, inconsequential, and manageable actions infused with meaning. That naturally has them be able to take the bigger actions in time, okay? So they're simple, specific, and concrete. Then we want them to invest in the action. Again, what's the future outcome? What's the personal benefit? What's the meaning and the purpose to this, okay? And it's also tied to their resilience. What's the natural strength you are using to do that action? What's the natural contribution you're making as you do the action? And how does that feed back to your own well-being? This is going to feed their resilience and their creativity. And when these start to string together, they're interrelated. You could say, oh, well, there's that simple action. Wow, look at that outcome. How does that feed back to you? Oh, I feel great. It's wonderful. If only, you know, my life could really be like that. And then what does that reinforce in you? Well, it reinforces my level of confidence. I feel like healthy. How much do you want that? That's how you kick in the desire. Okay, you've got a wonderful outcome. You're using strength, simple action. How much do you want it? I want it that much. 10 out of 10. Great. Second question. And what if it's not easy to do? Even if it's painful to do it, what enables you to do it, and what's it worth to you to do it? This will engage their willpower, because it's not about a feel-good action, okay? Because if it's only about feel-good, as soon as there's a challenge, they're gonna drop it. Yeah. This is why we're tying it to well-being and desire and well-being together will strengthen the willpower, because they know maybe sometimes it won't be easy. Maybe there might be some pain and suffering involved as I grow, but it doesn't have to feel like suffering, okay? I know why I'm doing it. There's a purpose to it, okay? So 2 key questions is, how much do you want that outcome, and what is it worth to you to get there, even if it's painful? That will engage desire and will. And that, I think, are better questions than, how will I know that you've done it? By when will you do it, and how will I know, right? So this, again, that embeds accountability. How are we doing for time here? Ooh, we're at the end. We're a little bit over. Okay. Any questions on that?
I'm just thinking, when we go through this with the client, is it possible that maybe within a short period of time going through this process, there's no action defined?
That's right. There might not be. They might, because when you go through this process, you will start working out, they will work out or realize why they're doing this action. So if they were originally saying, I need to call 10 clients because it's really just driven by, I don't want to lose my business. Whereas once we go through this process, they might say, forget the clients, I'm designing a webinar, I'm designing a presentation. That will actually get me more clients in my network, and then I'll have a reason and a more fulfilling conversation with them, right? So when it's coming more from autonomy, it may shift and change the kinds of choices they're making. It might shift their vision. It might clarify their purpose, okay? Again, it's neutralizing that sense of fear and obligation, okay? Yes, you will be investing a few more minutes of your time to go through this process with them, but it will end up being more natural, organic, and sustainable, is what I'm saying, okay? Now, this can be done quickly. This could be done over a period of 30, 45 minutes as well. I mean, you can decide how long you want to go on this and how deep. So I wanted to give you a quick summary here of the simple things to remember is all creative energy is coming from a source, and that source is the client. And what's important is that they realize they are the source, not something else. So whenever they're energized, you want to make sure you've internalized it with them before they go take action. So connect them to the source. Then charge up that energy from source that has them feel resilient. That'll naturally connect them to a strength. It'll naturally create vision and a sense of contribution. Then you create the action. The action is a natural expression of their own resilience. Keep it simple, specific, concrete. It doesn't have to be big and dramatic. It can even just simply be, I'm taking my dog for a walk, but now it has a different meaning, okay? And in order to create the accountability, focus on their will and desire, okay? By creating more investment in the future outcome, and make sure that they receive back into their well-being. What are they receiving? What's the pleasure they're getting out of it? What does that reinforce them so they can put more of that energy back out into the action? So you want to create that give, receive, okay? Any questions there? Or does that help simplify it a little bit more?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so action comes from source. Get in touch, connect with the source. Out comes the strength, that builds contribution vision. Then comes the action, then generate the investment and well-being, that give and receive that the action is maintaining, okay? So action from source resilience is autonomy. That's how we live an autonomous life, by being in action from our resilience. Okay. So I had mentioned this to Irene at before we started recording, but we've got modules coming up in May 24th to 26th in Munich, and July 5th to 7th is actually in Frankfurt. I made a mistake here on the slide. The July 5th to 7th is in Frankfurt, and then in Paris in October 11th to 13th. And here in Module 1, we focus on how to build resilience and build the action, as well as how to even get your clients invested in the work you're doing with them. So it's using the same kind of a formula where you're building their will and desire to invest in the work process with you, whether you're leading a workshop or doing a coaching session or a mediation. These are all the same ingredients to build that resilience, autonomy, and willpower. We have a conflict workshop coming up next weekend in Frankfurt. It's based on the EED, everything. It's a little bit more advanced, but it's working with those relationship dynamics so that we can reconcile conflict from resilience, as opposed to creating a mediation where it's win-lose and compromise. This is very different. Mm-hmm. Irene, if you want, I can send you a link so you can see previous webinars, because we've covered dynamics and conflict and things like that in previous webinars. If it interests you, just let me know.
Yeah, that will be good.
Okay. Yeah. And our next webinar is on June 5th, and this deals with relationship archetypes. This is a way to, it's another dimension that EED works with. It's again to do with fractals, but every drama that we're playing out in our life is actually happening on a more archetypal level. And it helps us depersonalize, de-trigger ourselves from those dramas so we can actually learn from what's happening to us, as opposed to feeling like we're suffering like a victim. When we put it more on an archetypal level, we don't feel so victimized by our circumstances and our conflicts. So in fact, when we look at everything through archetype, then everything happening around us in the world almost seems like it's a movie, like it's scripted. It gives you a whole different sense of reality, which liberates you more. And you then get into creator consciousness, more resilience. So this is a level of awareness we teach in EED. It's called the relationship awareness, where we're aware of dynamics, but then also the cosmic awareness, where everything works in synchronicity. So it's going to focus on these two levels, relationship dynamics and the level of synchronicity, how everything is interconnected. So there's the link, eed-webinars-2019.eventbrite.com to sign up for the next webinar. And feel free to contact me if you have more questions. Visit the website, essence-dynamics.com. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube at EE-Dynamics, or you can email me, troy@essence-dynamics.com or info@essence-dynamics.com. If you have any questions or want further follow-up, or even if you want links to previous webinars, I can give those to you. What are you leaving with? What is feeling either very concrete or what is feeling inspiring for you? What do you take away from the webinar today?
To me, first of all, it's very reflective. I'm reflecting what you've explained to my own personal experience as a client.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yeah, I'm putting myself in a client situation because of my personal situation at the moment.
Yes.
From the coaching part, I'm also trying to relate to how it connecting with the CPCC.
Mm-hmm.
How, yeah, what's the relation, how it should go further or it's go wider.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, but very curious to know more.
It's giving you an extended version of how to create action and accountability. Sometimes in some methodologies, it's too simplified. Yeah. And this gives you a few extra things to think about, which will only enrich and enhance the action, and that I'm saying self-accountability as opposed to accountability with the coach.
Yeah.
If the client still wants accountability, that can be done. And a suggestion is, who do you want to be accountable with? It may not be with you. And it might be, I need a buddy system, or it will be with my business partner. I'm going to share this, my ideas with them, whatever. And I'm going to tell them what I'm doing. I'll have them check in with me. The point is that they're creating that accountability from resilience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do agree the word enrich. Yeah, it
enrich.
Really enrich there. It gives you, as I said at the very beginning, I need input. This is really the input to yeah.
My suggestion is when you'll get the link for the recording, watch it again in a few days and let it keep enriching you, keep applying it back to what you're already doing and what you already know. Again, EED is designed to enrich and enhance. And sometimes there are new concepts, but it's meant to interlink. It's meant to be embedded in what you're already doing.
So you created EED after the CTI thing, right?
Yeah, or even concurrently. I mean, I was already working as a coach for a few years, and I took an official system. Like I went through Coactive and got certified, and then I began teaching their courses as well. But EED was already in development, almost concurrently. But it was once I started to certify coaches through CTI, I noticed certain gaps in a training. I noticed what's the difference between a mediocre coach and a master coach, and what's not getting trained explicitly. There were things there that were more implicit, and I wanted to make them more explicit. And so then over now, 12 years, I've made it very explicit, and it's expanded on its own. So this is a great system for learning a new level of master coaching and beyond. Alina, what do you walk away with?
I'll definitely review this session. I am in discussion with a client who already realized or said what he wants to do, but still, because that is very painful to him, is not yet into, into doing it. And I do know that I have not, or at least I felt not contributing as much as I could have done it to assist this client. So back to work.
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's a bit of fear and resistance getting in the way first. So that would need to be neutralized. And
right.
One way is when it's obligation, like I must do this, okay? One way is, so when you say I must, what's that energy you're using to say I must? That is actually resilient energy. The energy they use to push themselves is actually resilient energy. Get them in touch with that energy of I must. Take away what they must do or think, and just have them connect with that energy and ask them what they're enjoying in that energy. How does that energy feed back to their well-being? That loosens them up, gets them more in resilience again. Then you can return to, and now what do you want to create from that sense of strength and well-being? That might already start to turn it around. There's more that can be done. There's more options, but there's a simple thing is, what's the simple pleasure? And in other webinars, when we talk about resistance, we can face it head on. Maybe they're carrying around an old dream that they need to let go, but they've never dared to let it go.
It's an old dream that in new circumstances will not hold on.
Right.
And it's something that he needs to redefine, but as a process, he needs to mend the relationship. And it's a relationship which he feels that at least for the moment, it kills everything what he created in professionally.
Yeah.
And definitely there is a power shift in that context. He needs now to understand how to integrate into his future self if he wants to continue to be in that working process.
I'm thinking of a previous webinar we did. This has to do with hero's journey. This is a death of self and a rebirth of a new self. And we all go through this kind of a grieving process of a letting go and a taking on. So,
it's somewhere, definitely it's grieving.
Yeah.
Definitely it's grieving.
Yeah. Now, sometimes, to keep it in context with this webinar, sometimes the action itself is simply reflection, resilient reflection, just getting into enjoyment. And also another thing that can be done is dreaming work. Okay, so no obligation to do anything here, but imagine letting go of all that stuff. Allow the death to happen. And now what's happening with you? And there will be probably fear, but there will also be some freedom, some relief. And when you go into the freedom and the relief, you can rebuild resilience from there. And when that's strong enough, then you can return and say, now, are you ready to let that go now? They might say no and say, fine, you don't have to let it go. still preserving that resilient feeling. Now, what's it like to be in relationship with something that feels old, may not feel completely a part of you, but it's still hanging on. This is classic with somebody that says, I want to start my new business, but I can't do it for 6 months. Well, what are you going to do for those 6 months in transition? You're still going to be stuck at your old job. So it's not about ask them to quit the job today. It is build resilience and have them create a new relationship with this job for the next 6 months so that they're feeling reinforced, knowing they're going to, start that new business in 6 months. But why suffer for 6 months waiting to start the business? Okay, again, this is an example of resilient action. Okay, keep it simple, keep it concrete, keep it realistic. It's not about sell the house today, get the divorce today. Maybe eventually they will sell the house or get the divorce. But what do they do in the meantime? So any action is an expression of resilience. Okay, and so you want to get them in resilience with themselves and then resilient relationship with their world, with their current functions. And then there are small actions they can take to reinforce that. So it's another direction to go. Does that help you a little bit?
At least it gives me some very good hints.
Okay, yeah, and it's places to look and explore. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but I mean, it's going to go outside the limits or the bounds of this webinar. But if you want, we can talk privately if you wish. If you need anything more, I'm always glad to offer that.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you both of you, and thank you to those who are listening to this recording. And keep in touch. Contact us, and hope to see you on next month's webinar in June.
For sure.
So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Enjoy. Yes. Thank you.